This video contains flashing lights and colors.
Do you miss the classic Universal Studios attractions like Confrontation, Back to the Future the ride, and the Jaws ride? Do you want to go back in time and visit the park as it was in the 90s? Well, fortunately, you can still do that, sort of. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the attractions at Italy's Movieland Studios. This place is home to several rides that may trigger a sense of deja vu, but beyond that, there's a surprising amount of innovation and awesomeness to be found. You could call this a knockoff of Universal Studios, but who said that was a bad thing? Let's take a look at Movieland's present attractions right here on Theme Park Crazy. Before we dive into this park, here's a little context and history behind it, courtesy of the folks at Dark Ride Database. Located in the Italian province of Verona, Movieland is part of the larger Caneva World Resort. Found on the shore of Lake Garda, this resort got its start in 1965 as a themed dance club named Dancing La Caneva. Caneva translates to English as wine cellar, and the club was themed to one. The club was owned by Alfonso Amicabile, whose family continues to own and operate the Caneva World Resort to this day. After the club's success, they looked into ways to expand. Eventually, a friend of his suggested that they should build a water slide, and Amicabile expanded on this idea. After visiting the recently opened Aqualand in South France, the decision was made to build a water park at the resort. According to several sources, this was the first water park in all of Italy. This water park, named Caneva Aqua Park, was also a major hit for the resort and remains operational today. But of course, a water park in Italy could only operate seasonally. By the early 2000s, Amicabile sought to open an attraction that could operate beyond the summer season. Around that time, he and his family visited the United States. They were impressed by parks like Universal Studios Florida and Disney's Hollywood Studios, and wanted to bring the same kind of cinematic theme park experience back home to Italy. So in 2002, Movieland made its grand debut. Since its opening, the park has had a pretty hectic history with tons of ups and downs. There's actually a great interview with Alfonso's son Fabio that I will link in the description, where he goes into the park's history. Throughout its lifetime, the park's lineup has constantly evolved, with new attractions and experiences being added almost regularly. This also means there are a good amount of defunct attractions too, and we'll get into a few of those. For now though, let's dive into what kind of rides this extremely unique park has to offer. For this video, we'll be focusing on the major rides, since really, there's not a whole lot I could say about the kiddie rides. Though I can say the Kit Mini Jet ride has boats that were definitely inspired by the vehicles in the Cars franchise. They also have an antique cars ride uncoincidentally named Route 66, the same highway predominantly featured in the films. With those out of the way, we'll start with the thrill rides. First is Space Mission Orbit. We're starting out with the more typical thrill ride here, as this is merely your average space shot tower by S&S Sansei. These exist at several parks across the country and use compressed air to shoot passengers into the sky. The name Space Mission Orbit is clearly an homage to Mission Space at Disney World's Epcot, but we're only scratching the surface here. Next up is probably the most thrilling attraction at the park, Diabolik. At Islands of Adventure, they have the Incredible Hulk, a thrilling comic book-themed coaster with a cobra roll and a vertical loop. Coincidentally enough, that description also fits Diabolik, though the layout is much shorter. Diabolik is actually the name of an Italian comic book about a master thief of the same name, who ruthlessly murders anyone who tries to get in his way. Quite a dark character to name a roller coaster after. What's next? Frollo 325? Okay, to be fair, the character's personality has since evolved to be a more Robin Hood-esque anti-hero. That said, the coaster itself is actually a pretty rare design, an Invertigo model by Dutch manufacturer Vekoma. This is one of only 3 Invertigo models left in operation, with the others being Triops at France's Bagatelle and Invertigo at Ohio's Kings Island. The one at Movieland was actually relocated from the now-defunct Six Flags America in Maryland. And get this, at Six Flags, it was actually named Two-Face: The Flip Side. Yes, another dark, villainous comic book character. That said, this is currently the only roller coaster at the park after the closure of their Flintstones-inspired area. So if you're looking for credits, be sure to hit up this one. But don't just go for this credit, because there are a lot of more memorable attractions to check out. Next up is a ride that many consider to be a roller coaster, but most don't qualify it as one, the Hollywood Action Tower. Right off the bat, the name and letters on the front instantly bring to mind the famous Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. But unlike that ride, which is basically a beefed-up high-speed elevator system with multiple drops and a dark ride section, Hollywood Action Tower is one of the earliest examples of a drop tower ride. This attraction is a first-generation drop tower by Swiss manufacturer Intamin. It was originally installed at Galaxyland in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So here's how it works. A ride vehicle seating 4 people is lifted up the center of the tower before it's pushed outwards towards the outside rails. The car is then dropped, falling down the tower and leveling out at the bottom of the ramp. You'd think the Tower of Terror inspiration would end there, but here's the crazy part. They actually have the Twilight Zone music playing as you reach the top. Now here's where things do get a bit muddled. According to the aforementioned interview with Alfonso Amicabile's son Fabio, the park has paid for licenses of intellectual properties in the past. For example, the US Army stunt show they have used to be called the John Rambo Stunt Show. Officials had to pay 40 million Italian lira a year at the time for the Rambo license. This equals around $24,000 or around $43,000 when adjusted for inflation, though I'm not sure how accurate that is. In many occasions, Movieland has licensed properties fair and square. It's just the way that they license these properties is often odd. Admittedly, I'm not sure how this process works behind the scenes. Most likely, they license the Twilight Zone music, but not the Twilight Zone name, for this ride. It seems that they do pay licensing fees, but they apply them in a minimalist and selective way that gives the feel of the IPs for the lowest cost. The same goes for the next attraction, Antares Interstellar Space Lines. Despite the name, this is much more like Mission Space than Space Mission, as its story centers around a mission to Mars. After a colorful queue area, you enter the ride itself, which is literally just a Gravitron carnival ride. You know, that spinning UFO-shaped ride you see at your local fair that presses you against the wall with centrifugal G-force? Funnily enough, Mission Space also uses centrifugal force to simulate the G-force of space travel, though with a much more advanced system. With Antares, you're getting a Gravitron, but with a good amount of theming. Instead of seeing the ride operator in the center, you see a series of screens. The top and bottom screens give you a view of the outside, and the center screens serve as your communication. It's pretty funny that the screen you're looking at directly in front of you is mostly either blank, has a hyperspace pattern, or just has the ride's logo on it the whole time, with the occasional person popping in. But still, the force alone and the unique placement of the screens make this a thrilling attraction for sure. It may be the most well-themed Gravitron out there. Next up is an even more thrilling attraction, the SuperJet. Originally, this ride was known as Kit SuperJet and was directly themed to the classic Knight Rider TV show with David Hasselhoff. This one is easy to explain. You get in a 15-seater boat and are driven around the course by an actual professional stunt driver. The course is short, circular, and narrow with tight turns. In fact, it takes place in the same stadium that the US Army stunt show is in. On this ride, the driver shows no mercy, and you actually go pretty damn fast through it all. You even do controlled spin-outs. This, along with Diabolik, is often described as the most thrilling attraction the park has to offer. It's pretty obvious that we wouldn't see anything like this at an American theme park. Any insurance company here in the States would pass out just looking at this ride. And it's not just a joyride either. There's actually onboard music and audio included to make you feel like you're inside of an action movie. At one point, you even enter a building where the sound of a plane flying overhead plays. You also see splash effects emulating bullets raining down from it. These effects are seen on the course as well, and I can honestly say this may be the closest you'll get to being inside of an action movie. You really have to give these drivers credit, and whoever set up the effects. Now let's head over to Pangea, which is Movieland's take on Jurassic Park. Here, you go on a dinosaur safari, but here's what makes the ride unique. You drive your own vehicle. Yes, guests 14 and up are able to drive an actual Jeep through the entire course, and they don't need a license. You might think this would be a recipe for disaster, with people speeding through it like jackasses on Route 8 and crashing into everything. Well, the park actually thought of this beforehand and implemented several safety features into the Jeeps. First of all, the vehicles are modified to cap the speed, so you can't just barrel through the whole course. Second, the vehicles come with a collision avoidance system. This uses sensors to stop the vehicles in their tracks if they're about to hit something. All of this said, according to themeparkseu.com, the goal of the ride is to drive through the course as quickly as possible, as that's how you earn the most points. Also, according to Theme Parks EU, younger drivers often get the biggest scores as they tend to be less cautious and nervous about driving. This is especially impressive because as you're encountering dinosaur animatronics on the side, you have the added thrill of a constantly changing terrain. Dips, hills, slippery when wet sections, it's certainly different from your average theme park car ride. Perhaps the best way to experience this ride is at night, when you can only see your immediate surroundings illuminated around you, and the dinosaurs are lit up too. Creepy, cool, or both, you decide. Now let's head over to Magma 2.1, a completely original and totally epic ride experience. This attraction uses Man-Cat 1 trucks, which are off-road vehicles designed for the German army. And once again, it's being controlled by a stunt driver. Guests board these high-capacity trucks and are taken on a high-speed, special effects-laden journey to a geothermal power plant. When I say high speed, I mean it. Unlike the Jeeps on Pangea, there are no speed limiters on these trucks. You just go zooming through narrow corridors and forks in the road. It actually looks pretty terrifying, but again, professional stunt drivers are on the payroll. On the way to the plant, you'll pass by several thrilling scenes, including a leaking tanker, a seesaw bridge, and a gas station. By the way, there's a good chance you will get wet on this ride, so if you don't want to walk around in wet clothes, feel free to buy a poncho in the vending machine at the start of the queue. Once you reach the power plant, something goes wrong, and when you go back outside, all hell has broken loose, with fire bursting everywhere. You try to escape on a bridge, but in a truly impressive effect for a local family-owned park, the bridge seems to break loose. This sends the truck splashing down, and it's done with a moving platform. It really is quite a sight. The truck then makes its way through the water and attempts to go up a steep hill, only to shoot backwards downhill and make another huge splash. This ride is just plain awesome, and with a minimum height of just 48 inches, it's high-thrill fun for the whole family. You know, what's really fascinating about this park is that it's always changing and adding new experiences. That means it has a good amount of defunct attractions that have been replaced. One such ride was U-571, a submarine simulator based on the 2000 Matthew McConaughey film of the same name. This attraction took an old Astroliner fair ride and fully themed it to a submarine in an extremely creative way. Basically, you entered a building that's a German military base. Inside is a large pool of water with a submarine inside of it. When the base comes under attack, live actors direct you to the submarine for an evacuation. Now here's where things get cool. The submarine is actually an illusion. Just about one half is actually submerged in water, but the other half doesn't exist. Beyond the waterfall and a dark wall, the other half of the so-called submarine is actually the Astroliner ride that's not actually submerged. A pretty cool effect. Guests sat on what looked like two missiles in a cramped space as they attempted to escape. As with other Astroliners, the large cylinder could tilt and turn to simulate movement. When the sub was attacked by the Allied forces, water was pumped into it as well. Ponchos were recommended because you truly did get soaked on it, and it's what everyone remembers about the experience. It really felt like you were inside a sinking submarine that could implode at any moment. You could argue that this was one of the most submechanophobic attractions of all time, and I know, I say that word a lot, but I think I have a problem. Maybe I'm a submechanaholic. Eventually, this fan favorite closed in 2024, but the ride system was kept in place and modified into a new attraction the next year. In 2025, K6, the Royal Intelligence Agency, made its debut. This new experience is a spy thriller clearly inspired by the Kingsman films, with the queue starting off in a tailor shop and guests being recruited on a secret spy mission. The queue is pretty elaborate, and it's clear the family put a lot of time and effort into decorating it. Then you get to the submarine, and on the inside, an array of synchronized digital screens was added to give a good view of your surroundings. Also, the awkward missile seating was replaced by modern, more ergonomic seats. Though it isn't as intense or frightening as the original, you do still get wet on it. And to park guests, that's all that matters. In several videos of the attraction, you could see and hear people having a blast on it. So if you need a break from the hot Italian sun, this attraction is right up your alley. And hey, if they ever decide to retheme it for the Halloween season, maybe they can base it on Markiplier's upcoming Iron Lung movie. Though that would require a lot of red dye in the water, so that's probably out of the question. Let's move on to another attraction that changed over the years. Themed to the Terminator franchise, this attraction started as a show called Terminator 2 Live before it was revamped into an interactive experience in 2010. This experience, called Terminator 5D, combined a shooting game with a 3D movie. Guests stood up and used infrared pistols to shoot targets on animatronic robots and enemies on a screen. It also utilized live actors, which is quite common among the park's attractions. Later on in 2017, the attraction was changed again to Android, the final 3D battle. This time around, a new moving seat system by Italian company Moviemex 3D. These seats consisted of benches that sat up to 4 people and a single pull-down lap bar for each group. The 3D film was replaced by another one that was clearly inspired by Universal's Transformers: The Ride. The plot involves guests joining a special army of bipedal robots to protect the core of a spaceship. There are even scenes that were apparently directly copied from the original. There was this scene where you're being pulled through a building, and the finale where the villain is defeated by falling off a building. You could argue that this comes the closest to directly copying an existing theme park ride. But even this experience is now defunct, because in 2024, another licensed IP took its place. This time, the attraction is called We Are Back, Kids from the Future. Of course, this title is a play on Back to the Future, and although the exact name Back to the Future isn't used, it's clear that the park licensed individual characters and locations from the franchise. Here, you start by entering a facility known as Dr. Brown and Sons Enterprise. In this universe, Doc Brown has died and is memorialized by the entrance. Okay, that is definitely not Christopher Lloyd. I would know. You then enter what looks like some kind of cryotherapy-looking area where there's a whopping 8 minutes of pre-show. The plot involves Doc Brown's sons, Jules and Vern, who were his actual kids in the franchise. They showcase their new time travel tourism business and the science behind their devices. Apparently, time travel involves a classic baking soda and vinegar experiment and an awkward pause.
Utilizzeremo quindi una potenza superiore agli 1,21, portandola fino a 3,21 gigawatt.
Guests are invited to travel to 1855 with the brothers' new technology. Before your arrival, Jules and Vern take the time train to scout the area for landing. At that moment, Doc Brown's grandchildren and Jules and Vern's children, Zach and Jesse, hack the feed and explain that they travel from the year 2055. Apparently, Doc Brown, who died before Zach and Julie were born, left them a letter instructing them on how to reassemble the DeLorean from the movie. Wait, reassemble the DeLorean? After this? Take it to AutoZone, put some turtle wax on it, and shut up. Okay, to be fair, there were multiple DeLoreans existing in different timelines in the movie, so maybe they could have gotten one of the other ones working, but it's still funny to think about. Jesse explains that Jules and Vern are stuck in the year 1855 after hitting their time machine's plutonium tank on a group of rocks. This means you have to go back and rescue them before the surrounding area essentially gets nuked. If they don't rescue their fathers, they'll cease to exist, and so will the guests. It's a pretty hectic story, and park fans often criticize the excessive amount of exposition. After entering the theater and taking their seats, guests see a live actor in a radiation suit. This is supposed to be Zach, while a voiceover plays to make you think it's actually him in the suit. Parts of the set then lower down to reveal glowing structures resembling the flux capacitor. On screen, a 3D movie plays where you follow Zack and Jesse to the past, with references to the film like the Lone Pine Mall and the courthouse clock. Just like on the original Back to the Future ride, you start out in Hill Valley before going to the future and prehistoric times. You dodge a T-Rex, there's a crystal cavern, and there's some red-hot lava too. Though the Movieland version does have a pretty cool fire effect in the theater. Finally, you reach Hill Valley in 1855 and stop the time train from exploding. Jules and Vern remark on how they like the names Jesse and Zack, and to be continued? Have you ever heard of a theme park ride that ended on a cliffhanger? Are we to assume you never left 1855? Is Italy going to be fighting the Crimean War when you exit the building? Admittedly, this show is a lot of fun to talk about, but it has received a negative reception from parkgoers who mainly criticize the pre-show's length. And now for the park's longest and perhaps most notable attraction, Disaster, the Blockbuster Tour. This ride is inspired not only by the tram tour at Universal Studios Hollywood, but also by other tram tour rides like the old Disney MGM Studio Backlot Tour and the now-defunct Disaster. Right off the bat, you board a high-capacity bus and make your way to the first scene. Here, a giant gorilla stands on an electrical tower while a downed helicopter sits next to him. Just like the famous Catastrophe Canyon from Disney's Backlot Tour, water bursts forwards towards the side of the tram. After this, your vehicle is suddenly stopped by two 1920s gangsters resembling Bonnie and Clyde. Some parks like Silver Dollar City have a train robbery, where your train is stopped by two robbers and you can give the robbers change, candy, etc. But here, it's pretty much a reverse train robbery, as they actually want to give you bootleg liquor. This takes place in the time of Prohibition, so the gangsters hand out tiny glasses of what they say is whiskey. Down the road is a scene that appears to be inspired by Indiana Jones, with a temple and a vehicle parked out front. A live actor dressed as a witch doctor emerges from the temple. You think something scary is going to happen, but then he just ends up dancing to the Banana Boat song from Beetlejuice. Okay, I know it's not originally from Beetlejuice, but why not assume it's another film reference? After this, there's a tonal whiplash. You head over to a shack in the woods where a backwoods hillbilly cannibal murderer is making his own version of Disney's Handwich. Without hesitation, he menacingly walks towards the bus with an axe and chases it off. This is a pretty random and violent moment for this ride. Following up this scene is a pleasant view of Lake Garda, and then another deja vu moment. Now for this next part, let's just say if you wanted to combine Fast and Furious Supercharged with the defunct Twister Ride It Out, this is your ride. Yes, after entering a barn, your vehicle is soon surrounded by a 360-degree screen tunnel. As the barn is destroyed, you realize you're being chased by several tornadoes. Now this is just my opinion, but the CG animation actually looks better than on the original Fast and Furious Supercharged. Eventually, you drive into the tornado, which causes the screen to glitch apparently, and your vehicle is lifted up into the damn stratosphere. Soon enough, gravity takes you to your doom, but just before you hit the ground, the whole thing suddenly cuts to a behind-the-scenes promotional video showing how they made the ride. Honestly, it's so jarring and out of nowhere that you could say it's downright hilarious. You then reverse out of the barn and then go forwards again into an area with replica. Why is replica such a hard word to say? Replica, props, and vehicles. And now we have the grand finale, Shark Park. After entering a tunnel, there's a sequence similar to the Mosasaurus scene on Jurassic World: The Ride, where the shark bites a pane of glass, causing the room to leak from above and water to leak out of the side. To be honest, this actually looks better than the scene on Jurassic World: The Ride, where the Mosasaurus just kind of bumps into the glass with his nose and makes a tiny crack. Once guests exit the tunnel, they enter the shark containment area, and now it's time for even more, say it with me, submechanophobia. The shark on the right swims around menacingly, and the shark on the left swims around and lunges towards the bus. The fact that you're on a bus and not a boat brings the Universal Studios Hollywood experience to mind, but as you can see, the shark animatronic has wires in its mouth, which brings to mind the Florida and Japan variations. On those rides, the shark bites onto a power line and is electrocuted. Here, it's implied that he already bit into the electric fence and is apparently just chewing on the wires like bubblegum. This shark is apparently impervious to electrocution. What a badass. But still, there's one major question you might have. Why does water suddenly burst from the enclosures when the sharks are swimming around? On the original ride, the water shoots up like that because the skipper tries shooting the shark with a grenade launcher but misses. Here, there's no grenade launcher to be found anywhere, and what's with all the bubbles? This can only mean one thing. The shark sparted. No other explanation, no further comments. And with that, you head back to the boarding station. So what do we make of all of this? Sure, there are plenty of other attractions and shows that I don't really have time to get to, but I wanted to give you a taste of just how unique and flat-out bonkers this park is. As much as it arguably knocks off Universal and Disney, I can safely say there's nothing like this on Earth. It's such a bizarre experience that it's really worth visiting. The fact that it's family-owned and operated is simply incredible. Just think, all of this was put together by a single family. The Amicabile family can regularly be seen walking through Movieland to see how everything's running. Now that just goes to show how much they care about this place. In a corporate age of synergy, consolidation, and maximizing profits at the consumer's expense, it's nice to see small family-owned parks like this thriving. Some Italian theme park enthusiasts even argue that this park is better than Gardaland, which is a major Merlin Entertainment-owned theme park that's literally 5 minutes down the street. I'm not kidding. Think about it. This quirky park with one relocated roller coaster is able to compete with a much bigger park that has 7 of them. And despite the financial hiccups in Movieland's history, the park still has new experiences being added to it regularly, pretty much every year. The family truly cares about this park and making it the best it could be. In all honesty, there should be more parks like Movieland, and I highly recommend booking a ticket to Verona and checking this place out. If you've ever visited this place, feel free to comment down below. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my last video and read them out. These comments come from my video on the Alice in Wonderland ride. Cosplay Core says, the reason for the Goofy screams is actually so cute. Former child prodigy says, 812, I was not prepared for this. Excellent spit take production, Peter. Thank you. Jabin Stevens Y9Q says, as a diehard fan of creepy stuff, I would like to see Disney do more of these types of rides in the future. Since not just kids enjoy Disney parks, I would have certainly enjoyed this. Ren Winchester 4465 says, I know they have the teacups nowadays, but I really wish they would bring this version of the ride back. This sounds like such an awesome ride. And Roll Favin says, it shocks me so much that Disney didn't do an intense documentation of the rides before they redid the rides.
If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. And I'm on TikTok. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.